What is up, guys? Marcellus Williams, aka TheSwolefessor, here to educate you on health, fitness, social well-being. And today, guys, you see the title, we're going to be talking about how much muscle you as an individual can actually build naturally. No BS, no pseudoscience, no, oh, this dude's on roids and claims to be natty, so he put on all this extra. No, I'm telling you guys the hard, cold truth. A lot of you aren't going to like me for it, but the hard, cold truth about how much muscle you can actually expect to put on realistically, both as a male or a female, from resistance training alone. I'm going to get into more details as to what I mean by that when I say how much muscle you can put on from resistance training alone. So let's get into it. You guys already know, and a lot of the reason I'm doing this video is because even though I've gotten this question a lot just since starting the channel, I've gotten it like just daily ever since I did my video over, like, you know, the truth about body types and how, yes, there are different quote unquote body types, but the whole somatotype thing is like, you know, the ectomorph, endomorph, mesomorph thing is BS. It's not based on any actual science or research. It was created by a crazy psychologist who had a biased agenda trying to prove a point with his own research, and how it's just nonsense. I'll have that link down below, as well as when I did my video over, like, you know, how the muscle growth potential of one muscle group doesn't necessarily impact the muscle growth potential of another muscle group in the body. I'll have that link down below as well. But you guys have just been asking me so much to just do a video over this, and even though I didn't want to, just because I know like people don't like hearing the truth, people don't like feeling like they're limited, but gonna go ahead and give it to you guys to you. So you guys have heard me say in the past before, in past videos, that on average, the most amount of muscles that a male's probably gonna be able, a male's probably gonna expect to put on is probably anywhere from 25 to 30 pounds of muscle from resistance training alone. That's the average, and I'll explain why I always say that as the average. But the reality is, guys, in actuality, the most amount of muscle that a male individual can possibly expect to put on is probably gonna be anywhere from 40 to 50 pounds in their lifetime, naturally, from resistance training alone. For a female, it's gonna be anywhere closer to more like 20 to 25, maybe very strong genetic potential on the high end, 30 pounds of muscle in their lifetime. Now, this does not apply to everyone. I want you to know right now, right off the bat, the majority of you watching this, that does not apply to you. That 40 to 50 for like males, guys, I'm sorry, that applies to like the genetic elite. When I'm talking about the genetic elite, I'm talking about the individuals who are taller, have bigger bone structure, and just really like good muscle structure, as in like longer muscle bellies, because if the muscle belly is longer, then it has the potential for more growth. Why? Because it just covers a wider area. So let's kind of get into how the whole muscle growth and muscle potential thing works, guys. You guys already know I've talked about diminished returns on this channel, and I'll have it linked in the description down below just for those of you who haven't seen it. But basically the way diminished returns works, guys, is that realistically, at best, this is at best, when you start weight training, you can expect to put on about, you know, however much muscle you put on in that first year, assuming that from the start you are on a proper training program and that you have, you know, proper nutrition, proper dieting. That's another thing. A lot of you guys feel like, oh, you're gonna say things like, oh, I've been training for this long, or I started training at this age and I put on this much muscle, and I'll get into all that. But assuming that you start training correctly from the start with proper nutrition, and let's say you're around 21 years old, so you've already, like, you know, gotten most of your growth that you're gonna get as far as your height from puberty, etc. Assuming that you dealt with all that, you start at 21 years old, you can expect to put on, you know, half of the muscle mass that you put on your first year, year after year. Meaning whatever you put on the previous year, you're only gonna put on half of that in terms of actual muscle mass the following year. So on average, you're probably looking at, in your first year, anywhere from about 15 to 17 pounds of muscle on average in your first year as a male, right? And for a woman, these numbers that I'm giving, you can pretty much just kind of just cut them in half. So on average for a male, you're gonna probably put on about 15 to 17 pounds of muscle in your first year. Now for this crazy genetic elite, you may expect something more like 18 to 20 pounds in your very first year, right? Okay, so let's just use that as the base, right? And you know what? Even for the genetic elite, it's really gonna be closer to that 18, but I'm gonna be very generous, and let's just say for someone who's on the genetic elite, right, you put on 20 pounds of muscle in your first year. All right, cool. Now, understanding that you're only gonna put on half of that the following year, then half of that the following year. So, you know, if you put on 20 pounds of muscle in that first year, you can expect at best to put on 10 pounds of muscle in the next year, because more often than not, guys, you don't even put on exactly half. You put on a little bit less. So you probably can expect more like 40 to 45% of what you put on the previous year, more so than a direct half or 50%. But let's just say at best that you're on just the most perfect ideal circumstances as far as like, you know, the perfect genetics with being taller, longer muscle bellies, and let's say, you know, your training, your nutrition, everything's just perfect for you to gain exactly half each year. I'm gonna have the numbers on screen right now showing kind of what you can expect like in those first 4 to 5 years, because pretty much, guys, that's when people pretty much, if assuming they're training and eating correctly, kind of max out the majority of their muscle growth potential is in that first 4 to 5 years. Now, when I say max out, guys, this doesn't mean that you stop growing, but due to diminished returns, it means that you're gaining such a small amount of muscle, like less than a pound of muscle, such small amounts year after year after year, that it's barely even worth tracking. So I'm gonna have those numbers on screen right now for like just the best ideal circumstances. So you're gonna see, you know, it's gonna be like 20, then 10, then 5, then 2.5. So you're gonna see, like, I'm gonna have it based on screen up until it gets to the point where you're not even gaining a pound of muscle each year. And keep in mind, whatever that last number is, you're gonna gain half of that the year after that, then half of that the year after that. So that's why people usually say, like, you know, oh, your genetic limit is this, because at that point you gain so little to where it doesn't even really matter. So you guys look at that and you look at what that final number is, and that's for the genetic elite about what you're going to expect to put on. Now, I'm gonna put the numbers up for somebody who's, you know, what the majority of you are gonna be, like the genetic average, and that's not an insult, guys, it's just how the world works. We're not all genetic elite freaks. Like, I wish we could all look like, you know, like my boy Derek, stuff like that, but we're not all tall, big bone structure, long muscle, but it's just not how it works for all of us. That's unfortunate. But now I'm gonna put up the average, meaning you're gonna start off about maybe gaining 15 pounds of muscle in that first year. And I'm gonna have the numbers up for the same thing, showing half what you get each year. And you're gonna see what those final numbers are. And that's where you're gonna see where the average is. And that's why I say on average, you can expect to put on that amount of muscle, which is around like 25 to 30. Now, here's the thing you guys have to understand. That is not a bad thing. Like 25 pounds of muscles, guys, like take wherever you start. If you're around 21, I don't care if you're like 150 pounds, maybe 13% body fat. I don't care if you're 170 pounds, maybe around the same percent body fat. Take wherever you start. Imagine adding 25 pounds of muscle to your frame. And because you do that, your body fat percentage is gonna go down, obviously. Why? Because you put on more lean muscle mass, so your body fat percentage is gonna go down. You're gonna body recomposition. You're gonna look great. You're gonna look phenomenal. People have this insane, unrealistic expectation of how much muscle they should be building, because you have all these fake naturals out here talking about like, oh, I'm natural, I put this much muscle on, or I'm natural, I put on like, you know, 60, 70 pounds of muscle on, and it's just not the case, guys. It's not true. Like, you guys already know what's our favorite saying here. I don't care what your favorite YouTuber said. This is based off actual science and research, and understand that your body physiologically, guess what? Like your mental will, if I just believe and work hard enough. No, it doesn't negate science. It doesn't negate what your body is capable of doing naturally. And think about it. If there wasn't this limit, right? Like I said, it's not a limit in the sense of you stop building muscle, but these diminished returns to where you build so little to where it doesn't matter. If that wasn't the case, there wouldn't even be a need for all these bodybuilders and different people to get on performance enhancing drugs. There'd be no need for it. Why? Well, because, I can just keep building endlessly if I believe hard enough, right? If I work hard enough. So then why take the health risk of getting on PEDs unless, there is kind of a limit to how much I can build naturally in a lifetime. So I wanna build more than that, so that's why they hop on PEDs. That's how it is, and that's the way it works, guys. Now, let's talk about a few exceptions, right? Because for a lot of people, it's not just that like, this fake natty claims this. No, a lot of people are confused because of things like this. Like I mentioned, we're talking about under circumstances that someone starts around the age of 21, right? Well, it's about around the age of 21, you probably fully grown from like, puberty, height, everything like that, because people confuse that. That's why I said we're talking about the amount of muscle you can put on from resistance training alone. Why? Because you're gonna put on muscle mass, right? From just growing naturally. Why? Well, because as you grow naturally, as you grow through puberty, as you get taller, your bones grow, right? Well, what's the primary function of our muscles? Movement, moving our bones. So therefore, if our bones are growing, our muscles have to grow as well. But that's completely separate from the muscle mass you're gonna put on from resistance training. It's two different things. Keep in mind, when I say this is the muscle you can put on naturally, I'm talking about from resistance training. You're gonna put on more than that, just from growing naturally as you get older and your bones grow and things like that. Now, so that's one thing people have to understand, is that you can't count those two together. The second thing that people understand is people who start off underweight. A lot of people are like, look, I've already reached that potential. It's only been like 2 or 3 years. But understand this. If you start off underweight, meaning let's say you're just a very active individual, you're very skinny active individual, and you just don't eat enough, you're not eating like you should just be at what your natural normal body weight would be, well, you started underweight. So you have to keep that in mind too. Another exception, guys, a lot of people don't freaking discern, which is such a simple mistake to make, but they don't discern the difference between fat gain and muscle gain. Guys, no matter what, as you gain muscle, especially when you get to the point where you kind of maxed out what you can kind of do as far as body recompositioning, like with your beginner gains, when you get to the point where you have to like make sure that you're eating in a surplus to put on muscle mass, you're gonna put on some fat with that. Now, because your body composition looks better, meaning somebody who's 175 pounds at 10% body fat is gonna look better than somebody who's 150 pounds at 13% body fat. Because you look better, you're gonna think like, oh, this is all muscle mass, but no, you put some fat on with that as well. So you have to understand that you can't just go based off the weight of the scale for, oh, this is how much muscle mass I put on. No, because you've also put on, you have to think about like fat, you have to think about glycogen, water weight, things like that. That all goes into it as well. And then you guys also have to keep in mind, understand that for a lot of people who, once again, like I said, if you started working out long before, like when you were like in your teens, like before you finished puberty, that yes, there's, like I said, there's natural growth, but what you have to understand also is how much of that natural growth, like I said, depends on genetic factors. For, like I said, the reason, and it's not just like, oh, taller automatically means like, oh, you're just genetically, because you're taller, you're gonna get more muscle. But here's how it works, guys. Think about it. If you're taller, you have a bigger frame by default. Bigger frame, probably bigger muscles. So bigger bones. So therefore, you need more muscle to cover that frame. Somebody who is 6'1" is gonna have more frame to cover than me, who's 5'7". So therefore, they're gonna have more absolute muscle mass. Just for, like, if we just compare like just our like just growing without resistance training alone, they're probably gonna put on more muscle mass in that case, which also means that when we start resistance training, because they probably have longer muscle bellies, not necessarily, and that's the problem with the whole ectomorph, endomorph, mesomorph thing. It's like, okay, you can have someone who's tall and very like lanky, you know, narrow bone, but you can also have somebody who's very tall and bigger bone. You can have someone who's short and lanky. You can have someone who's short and big bone. Like, that's the problem with the whole, you know, in the somatotype thing, because it's just based off visuals alone, doesn't actually look at your actual like anthropometry and structure. But like I said, you guys can check the video out to get details on that. But understand that because that person has a bigger frame, he's gonna have more genetic potential for muscle mass. Now, percentage-wise to our body weight, and we look at things like body fat percentage and percentage of our body weight, the amount of muscle we put on it can be very similar in proportion to our body weight. But in terms of absolute muscle mass, like if you rip the muscle mass off me, you rip the muscle mass off like Derek, for example. Like, for those of you who don't know, Derek's like my my taller Nigerian former NFL just freak beast friend. Like, if you rip the muscle off of us and you put on a scale, he's gonna have more absolute muscle. Now, like I said, relative to our frame and relative to our body weight, it may be similar, but he has more absolute muscle. So that's where the whole like the higher end genetic potential comes in. And the way you can kind of determine that, guys, I'm gonna have a link in the description down below that's gonna, one, kind of go over everything that I'm talking about, but two, is gonna give you a few calculators to kind of give you a estimate, a rough, somewhat accurate estimate of maybe how much muscle you can potentially build on. It's gonna have a few calculators, a few formulas. One is just based off how many years you've been lifting and how much you currently weigh. The other calculator is gonna pretty much ask you like, you know, what your wrist and ankle measurements are in inches, as well as like how much you weigh and stuff like that. And the reason we do that, guys, is because, once again, like the whole like, oh, I'm just big bone, that's kind of a thing, meaning like, you know, if you're bigger boned, right, you have like bigger bones, then that's, once again, more muscle mass to cover. Whereas if you have like smaller, narrower bones, less muscle mass is needed to cover that area. So you have to just understand that that's kind of the way it works. And then as far as like your muscle structure, like I said, you can't change the shape of your muscle, guys, right? It's impossible. I don't care what anybody's told you, you can't change the shape of your muscle. All resistance training does is make the muscle bigger. So I guess, so a way you can look at it is, you can't make your muscles longer, you can just make them wider, so to speak. So like I said, you can grow the muscle, but you can't change the shape. So if somebody starts off genetically already having longer muscle bellies, they're already longer than what maybe say what you have, well then that they have more potential for that muscle to grow, because it's more area, it's a longer area than what you may have. So therefore, as it grows wider, it's gonna be more total muscle mass than what your area may be if it's not as long a muscle belly. And that's just the way it works. That's where kind of like the genetics come in, right? And yeah, then people want to talk about things like, you know, oh, what about testosterone? But you guys have to understand that so long as you're within a normal range, differences in testosterone levels don't really like change anything significantly. Meaning that these people who are like just growing so much from test, that's because they're on insane amounts of it to where they're way above the normal range. And people who have trouble building muscle mass due to their testosterone, it's because they're way below the normal range. But like changing your testosterone levels by a few percents here and there doesn't do much for anything if you're in the same normal range. So even if you have a higher testosterone level than this other dude, but you're both in the normal healthy range, you're not gonna see much difference in terms of the muscle mass you're building due to that. So yeah, guys, that's just the reality of it. Like on average, that's probably the most, on average, the most of you guys are gonna see that's really noticeable is gonna be that 25 to 30 pounds. Now understand, like I said, you're gonna grow more than that. You're gonna put on more total muscle mass than that in your lifetime just from growth, but from resistance training alone. On average, that's what you can expect. That first number I showed you guys, like that number at the end, like was showing, like, you know, if you gain 20 pounds of muscle in your first year, so on and so forth. Guys, that's like I said for the genetic elite. I just described what that is with the longer muscle bellies, taller individuals. I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself at this point, but I just really want to beat this into you guys so that you understand how that is. Now, a lot of you are gonna be like, oh, but my first year I put on 20 pounds. Like, okay, but once again, how much of that was actually muscle? And understand this, guys, diminished returns start almost immediately, meaning for a lot of people, you may put on 2 pounds of muscle, right, in the first 6 months of your training. But then the second 6 months of your training, that second half of the first year, you may only put on actually a pound of muscle because diminished returns already starts. So if you were putting on like 2 pounds of muscle the first 6 months, you're probably able to put on about a pound of muscle in the second 6 months of your first year, if that. And once again, that's being generous. So, because for most majority of people, it's not going to be like that. And then the last thing I want to cover is, like I said, the importance of proper training nutrition. A lot of you are going to be like, man, I've been training for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and I haven't even put on like 10, 15 pounds of muscle, whatever. Well, and sorry to break it to you, that means your training and nutrition is garbage, period. Understand that these circumstances are the best circumstances you can get with proper training program with proper training program with a focus on like compound movements, with a focus on progressive overload, with a focus on adequate volume, adequate frequency, and then of course good nutrition as far as being in a caloric surplus, you're eating enough protein, enough carbs, like a good balanced diet. All of that goes into it, guys. These are under like the ideal circumstances that you need to be doing. And then also keep in mind, like, that you're doing enough accessory work to help with your lagging muscle groups, everything like that. And that's why even from the start, if you're doing all this right, it's probably gonna take you 4 to 5 years to kind of like get to that potential of like, your full body muscle growth of what your body kind of can do. Like I said, you're gonna keep growing after that, but it's going to be such a small percentage to where, think about it, okay, I only gained half a pound this year, and the next year you're going to gain half of that, the next year half of that, and half of that. So that's just the truth of it, guys. Those are the facts. I'm sorry if you don't like it. I'm sorry if you want to dislike this video, but you're not hurting me. You're just negating science, you're negating the truth. And I know it sucks, but the thing is, guys, I think the reason so many people get upset about this is because they feel like, oh, it's just not a lot of muscle. Says who? Compared to who? Compared to all these dudes on drugs and roids? Come on, guys. It's just not that. It's not that serious. First of all, how much muscle you put on is not the end all be all. At the end of the day, guys, be healthy, be strong, be functional. Aesthetics is gonna come with that anyway. And like I said, dude, like 25 pounds of muscle, bro, like that is so much. No matter what your starting point is, if you put on 25, 30 pounds of muscle on your frame, like you're gonna look great. I promise you, you're gonna look great. Like no matter who you are. You may not look like your favorite bodybuilder, but at the end of the day, you're not gonna look like anyone else other than you anyway. But you will look better than where you are now, I promise you. But yeah, that's it for the video, guys. I know it's kind of long, but I just wanted to kind of cover everything. So any questions you guys have, isn't something that I could have already answered in the video, but yeah. That's it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and leave a comment down below letting me know that you did. If you're not, leave a comment down below letting me know what I can do to get better. Like the video, share, subscribe. Keep it simple, specific, scientific. I'll catch y'all later.